And hello, everyone. Thanks so much for streaming with us. I'm Kira Phillips. Well, a potential game changer for kids in the fight against COVID. Pfizer requesting emergency use authorization for its vaccine for ages 5 to 11 years old. Nearly 30 million kids would be eligible if approved. American grade school children could start getting vaccinated as early as November. We'll have more on that in just a moment. A U.S. Navy nuclear-powered attack submarine colliding with an unknown object in the Pacific Ocean. The Navy says there are no life-threatening injuries as the USS Connecticut remains in safe and stable condition. The sub headed to port for a damage assessment. And the Nobel Peace Prize awarded to journalists Maria Ressa of the Philippines and Dmitry Muratov of Russia for their efforts to safeguard freedom of expression, democracy, and lasting peace. But we begin with more on that major news in the fight against COVID. Pfizer formally asking the FDA to authorize emergency use of its vaccine for children ages 5 to 11. The FDA set to consider the application on October 26th. If both the FDA and the CDC give authorization, shots could start in early November. Steve Osunsami is at CDC headquarters in Atlanta.
It's what many parents have been waiting for, and others this morning are fearing. Drug maker Pfizer says that it's ready to vaccinate children and is now requesting emergency authorization use of its vaccine for kids 5 to 11 years old. The shot would only be a third of the dose that's being put in the arms of people 12 and older. Like adults, children would need 2 shots about a month apart. And Pfizer says that these smaller shots prove safe and effective in children during trials. If approved, more than 28 million children would be able to get this vaccine.
Protection in our pediatric populations is part of the key to finally putting an end to this pandemic. We have millions of kids that are still vulnerable, and because of that, we still have major risk in parts of this population.
FDA advisors will meet on the 26th of this month to go over Pfizer's data. If the FDA decides to move forward, then it's up to the CDC to sign off. If the process moves quickly, millions of American grade school children could start getting vaccinated as early as the beginning of November, which means that many children under 12 could be fully vaccinated by the end of the year.
We want the FDA to go through its process around authorization to make sure that these vaccines are appropriate for our kids. I fully suspect that we'll see is that the benefit of these vaccines far outweigh any risk.
In Ohio, 9-year-old Luke Moore has already gotten his 2 doses of the Pfizer vaccine. He was part of the trial and says he couldn't be happier.
I feel good about it. I really want everybody vaccinated so at school people could have their mask off.
Kira, there's another age group that drug makers are preparing for, and that's children ages 6 months to 5 years old. A vaccine for that age group could be available as early as the beginning of next year. Kira?
All right, Steve Osunsami there at the CDC in Atlanta. Thank you so much. Well, some Texas clinics resuming abortion services after a federal judge blocked the state's 6-week abortion ban from being enforced. But those clinics could face retroactive legal action if the law isn't ultimately struck down. Congressional correspondent Rachel Scott is in Houston with a look at what could happen next.
Just 24 hours after a federal judge halted the most restrictive abortion law in the nation, only a handful of clinics are taking the risk to resume procedures.
We reached out to some of the patients that we had on a waiting list to come in to have abortions today.
Judge Robert Pittman ruled the law banning abortions as early as 6 weeks into pregnancy was flagrantly unconstitutional. But the decision does not give providers blanket protection. They can still be sued retroactively if courts eventually determine the law should be enforced again, leaving the majority of providers waiting on the sidelines. For weeks, Texas women like Maddie, a 21-year-old college student, have traveled hundreds of miles for an abortion. We sat down the day before her procedure in Mississippi.
At 6 weeks, you didn't even know you were pregnant.
Not even close. I was still living my life as regular and as carefree of a college kid as I could be.
Maddie tells me she was on birth control. When she visited the doctor, she thought she could only be a few weeks pregnant and under that 6-week legal limit.
When she told me that I was measuring at 10.5 weeks, I just cried. I was heartbroken and terrified because I felt like the only option that I knew I had was gone.
She started calling around to clinics in nearby states.
How many clinics would you say you called altogether?
Easily 30, if not more.
And most of them were booked.
Yeah.
She finally got an appointment in Mississippi, an option she knows others may not be able to afford. She hopes Texas women who want the procedure won't have to go out of state to get it.
It's frustrating that it took so long for them to figure out that this is unconstitutional. Like, this is a woman's right to have this option.
So, Kira, the majority of clinics here in Texas are taking a wait-and-see approach. I spoke to several who told me that they received a surge in calls after that ruling, but they say it's still clouded in so much uncertainty that they cannot take any chances. Kira?
All right, Rachel Scott for us in Houston Air. Thank you so much. Well, coming up, it has been 3 years since the deadly Paradise Fire in California. When we come back, the residents who escaped, and now they have found new appreciation for the meaning of home. Also ahead, dancing and the dark history of the 90s phenomenon, the Chippendales, the exotic dance troupe founder and his fall. More on the murder for hire plots right after this break. And welcome back to ABC News Live. I'm Kira Phillips. Residents of Paradise, California are still recovering 3 years after the deadliest fire in the state's history, which all but wiped the town of theirs right off the map. But that devastating fire also created a group of resilient residents, so-called climate nomads, forced to adapt to their new reality. Kana Whitworth with more on those residents that rose above the ashes, gaining a new appreciation for what home means.
The deadliest and most destructive wildfire in California history, the Camp Fire, all but wiped the town of Paradise off the map.
It's bad. Watch out! Watch out!
3 years later, many of the 27,000 people displaced by the fire are still unable to return. Part of a growing group of so-called climate nomads forced to reckon with nature, upending their lives and destroying their homes.
A lot of their friends have left and not come back, which is kind of hard for them. But it's just, this is where home is.
For Jed and Kayla, keeping their 3 boys near their school was key. But with nearly every building in town destroyed, they had nowhere to go.
What were your conversations like with your schoolmates when you're living in your tent? What were you talking to your friends about when you were at school?
I didn't really talk to much people when we were living in tents. I kind of just like avoided people as much as possible.
You avoided people?
Yeah.
Why?
Because, I mean, we lived in tents.
I mean, you didn't like talking about that?
Initially living in various hotels for months, Jed's plumbing tools were destroyed in the fire, their earning potential at an all-time low, and then insurance money running dry. The family resorting to living in the wilderness, just a tent over their heads.
During that fire season, the grades dipped down where there's D's and F's, but I'm proud of them. Before the end of the school year, they pulled them up.
No, we got A's and B's. I was super proud. I mean, they're doing homework by lantern light.
Braving freezing temperatures and snowstorms.
I woke up and I was beating the snow off the tarps and off the tents, and I heard the boys muttering something, and I crawled out, and their tent had collapsed on them because of the snow.
Christine Hansen had also lived in Paradise.
Well, I've lived here 25 years.
25 years?
Yeah. It's my favorite place in the whole world.
She also escaped the flames, as did most of her house. But the damage from the mold and toxins so significant, she can't move back.
So you had to have all these windows replaced already?
Yes, they melted and my big ones all melted.
Delayed by fights with the insurance company and contractors that are overworked, she doesn't know when she'll get home.
And you found yourself living with your parents in Chico.
I am so lucky. There were 57,000 people all looking for a place to live in 3 hours. So I was so fortunate that my parents do live in town.
From our perspective, as a consumer group, climate change has not been kind to our constituency.
Amy Bach of United Policyholders says very often it's harder for standing home survivors to reach a claim at all with their insurance company.
More hurricanes and wildfires that cause their customers to make claims, the more they want to get rid of the customers that are likely to file claims.
In 2019, 67,000 people won a class action lawsuit against PG&E, California's largest utility, in a multi-billion-dollar settlement. But as of September, over 75% of claimants are still waiting for a payout.
I've heard the answers and the excuses, and they don't get very far with me anymore. I mean, it's time to settle up and pay the people.
Stephen Murray has been in a battle since the fire to rebuild his home, raising his 1-year-old daughter in the back of his truck.
Come here, baby girl.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Now he puts his energy into helping others embarking on a similar battle, taking his family along with him.
You're up here, you need anything, come on up, everything's free.
We drove 100,000 miles taking survivors all over the United States, and so that was her first year of life. Then COVID hit. I took her to breakfast for the first time this week.
Like those who live in Greenville, a town recently destroyed by the Dixie Fire.
I want people to know what they're about to go through. Living in a trailer is not that much fun, especially with a family.
Along with gas, water, and food, he has delivered 125 propane tanks to residents in Greenville, and he has plans for more.
There wasn't an option to leave. There was, but it wasn't in my cards to leave.
Home never changes for some. They return, they rebuild. But others are forced to start over somewhere else. And according to researchers at Chico State, they say many are limited by income and the amount of available, affordable housing.
It doesn't exist in a lot of places in California, and I think that's why you're seeing a lot of exodus from the state overall.
These researchers have been documenting where people displaced from the Camp Fire have gone.
Did people who were forced to leave from the Paradise Fire end up in all 50 states?
Yes, actually, just checked that this morning, that there's survivors in every state.
They say their research demonstrates the range of outcomes that climate refugees can experience.
For people who are looking for affordable housing, it's almost hard to escape moving to one of those kinds of areas. Very little of California, if you look at the entire state, is completely free and clear of fire risk.
After losing nearly everything they owned, Jed and Kayla finally found a place to rent near the old home as another record-breaking fire season threatens the West Coast.
Was there ever a thought in your mind that maybe you don't come back here?
They were raised most of their life in Paradise, so they felt the connection. So it was like we wanted to move, but it wasn't really about me or him. It was about them.
And our thanks to Kano Whitworth for that story. Well, he founded one of the sexiest and most exotic dance troupes ever, the Chippendale Dancers. It was an international phenomenon in the 80s and 90s, but behind all the glitz and glam, a dark secret that the male dancers never dreamed of. The FBI revealing a mastermind behind multiple murder-for-hire plots was in their midst. Amy Robach has more.
Welcome to Chippendale.
I think people are still fascinated with Chippendales today because it's just this perfect relic of the big, wild, and crazy 80s.
It was booze, sex, drugs, rock and roll.
So to really understand the story of Chippendales, you've got to start with Steve Banerjee, the man who founded it.
A lot of people look at your business and say, it's a fad, it's a passing fancy.
Lust has never been a passing fancy. I mean, it's not a fad, it's pretty much like a necessity.
Enters on the scene a man who really changes the direction of Chippendales. His name is Nick DeNoia.
The meeting of Steve Banerjee and Nick DeNoia was the beginning of so much that nobody saw coming. It was an incredibly fateful meeting.
They saw things differently. Nick came from what's best for the production. Steve came from what pretty boy is going to sell more. I don't care if he can't dance or walk and chew gum. So you had this kind of fighting all the time, and it would get caustic, it would get vulgar.
DeNoia's vision takes the show to a whole new level. The Chippendales become daytime TV darlings.
From New York City, here are the Chippendales, right here.
It was pretty much every talk show. I mean, Regis and Kathy League.
Hunks and more hunks.
Sally Jesse Raphael. Donahue. So there was so much national attention.
You liked it. Your grandchildren are watching.
Chippendales became a household name.
We were the Beatles without the talent.
By 1987, the Chippendales were a huge success. But behind the scenes, trouble was brewing between the two men over profits and creative control.
I do remember Steve saying many times, "Who does this guy think he is? I made him. He's lucky to work for me."
And then Nick DeNoia is killed.
New York City police are trying to determine the motive in the murder of an award-winning television producer and choreographer. The victim, Nicholas DeNoia, was shot to death in his office.
And while on the hunt for Nick's killer, things get even more dangerous. There's a hit list on Chippendales who leave for other dance groups.
Really? Somebody's going to kill me for this? For a male exotic show, you're going to kill 2 people?
The 2-hour program features never-before-seen footage, plus an interview with the lead FBI agent who ultimately cracked the case linked to the Chippendale creator. Kira?
All right, Amy Robach, thanks so much. And you can tune in tonight to the season 44 premiere of 2020 Chippendales Murders. It airs tonight at 9, 8 Central on ABC. And we are monitoring that breaking news just outside of Washington, D.C., where police say at least 2 people have been killed in a shooting at a senior living building in Capitol Heights, Maryland. Police on the scene say they have at least 1 suspect in custody right now. They say the scene is secure and that lockdown at a nearby school has been lifted. Well, coming up, this week's Feel Good Friday. 2 people whose passion for helping others change their destiny and direction in life, all to help us survive this pandemic. More on their inspiring stories in just a moment. And welcome back. Well, it is time for Feel Good Friday, where we bring you a little good news heading into the weekend. And today, it's all about saying a special thank you to our nurses. For Alice Walton and Mobolaji Odewale, it was their passion for helping people that led them to nursing school. Alice worked at her dream job in the travel industry until 2020 when she got laid off. But while volunteering to get PPE to organizations in need, she found herself loving to work on the ground, doing something that made a difference. Fast forward to today. Alice is now at Columbia School of Nursing, and she couldn't be more excited. Now, similarly, when the pandemic broke out, Mobolaji ran into the fire to help underserved communities in Harlem and Washington Heights. And as a nursing student, he knew he had the opportunity to make a positive impact and combat healthcare disparity in underserved communities while rebuilding trust in healthcare. And when he got his white coat, he walked across the stage there and cried tears of joy for achieving something he had dreamed of for such a long time. Well, yesterday, I had the honor and privilege to speak with Alice, Mobolaji, and the Assistant Dean of Columbia Nursing, Kelly Bryant. Here they are. Joining me now for more, Alice and Mobolaji and the Assistant Dean of Columbia Nursing, Kelly Bryant. Thank you all for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for having us.
Alice, let's start with you, Alice. Tell us about that eureka moment that you talk about that changed your destiny and how it felt to get that acceptance letter from Columbia Nursing School.
Well, after I found myself not working in April of 2020, I started working with this great organization that was making and distributing PPE all over. There weren't very many clinical opportunities to get involved, but I knew I wanted to get involved somehow. And as I was writing blogs and doing social media and talking to nurses and doctors about what they needed on the ground, I started to realize that where I really wanted to be was having direct impact, not a few steps back in an administrative role. And it was something I'd considered before, but it was that moment of talking to people, hearing their stories, knowing that I found out that that's where I wanted to be.
Was it scary starting your life like completely over? I mean, you were doing something totally different and then just made this huge career change.
It was a little intimidating, but I think everything was scary back at that moment for everyone. And so it felt like now or never in a way. With the world on pause, this was the time to go back and continue my education so that for the rest of my career, I could be doing something where every day I go in knowing that I'm helping people.
And Mobolaji, I see you shaking your head like, yes, that's exactly how I feel as well. And I understand you were actually working with cancer patients, and that completely changed your destiny. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, so prior to jumping into like this great profession, I actually did clinical research with an oncology patient, and it was working with a great teams of people that were looking into like early detection of liver cancer. So with that part of it, to where you could see the disparity of care among patients of like Black, Indigenous, people of color, and just to like see how that impact the overall survival rate. And also just being able to like see the aspect of like the nurses that are on the bedside providing the care for those patients. Just the compassion aspect of it, the caring part of it sort of like nudged me to go into this profession.
It's so awesome seeing you cross that stage and how excited you were. Thumbs up, tears coming down your cheeks. Dean Bryan, Mobolaji has said that you don't just lead by word, but by action. And the action that you've invested into your community has been tremendous. There in Washington Heights and in Harlem. It's been so inspiring, not only, for your students, for all of us. Tell us about that and what has motivated you to do that specifically.
Oh, I just love helping, the community, and our students are so great at participating in some of these projects. So during COVID, yes, we immediately were on the front line. We helped with training nurses at the hospital that were being redeployed to units where they were going to be taking care of COVID patients. We helped with vaccination of the Washington Heights and Harlem community. We also helped train our nurses who also participated in working on the floors, helping the nurses who were, overworked, working long hours, stressed. And these students were able to go on the floor and help these nurses during the hardest times during this pandemic. So those are some of the highlights. And they, our students are courageous. Although there was a fear, we all were, scared that we possibly could also be affected by COVID. But I think our desire to help was so much stronger than, our fear. So I'm very proud of our students. They did an amazing job.
And Alice, how does it feel to sit next to Mobolaji there and just talk about what you both are doing, not only for the community, but also for so many diverse communities, and you're doing it together?
I mean, it's great to be part of this class and this community at the School of Nursing. Mobo is a year ahead of me, so it's exciting to see what all he's done within the past year, and what I have to look forward to both academically and with the community outreach that Columbia does.
Well, it's obvious that you are working straight from your heart. Finally, Dean Bryant, why are you so proud of Alice and Mobolaji, and what makes them so special here and such amazing nurses?
I am so proud of the two of them because you can see their passion for nursing. A lot of these opportunities, they didn't have to do it. They volunteered. I worked directly with Mobo at the vaccination center, and I can see how excited he was to be giving back to the community. So we're so proud of both of these students because they chose this profession. They're great examples of Columbia School of Nursing, and they're going to be our future of our healthcare system. So we're looking forward to them graduating and helping out during these tough times.
We're going to follow all three of you, Dean Bryant, Alice, Mobolaji. Thank you three so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
And you can find more feel-good stories at goodmorningamerica.com. All right, are we all feeling good now on this Friday? That does it for us this hour. I'm Kira Phillips. Thanks so much for joining us. Remember, ABC News Live is here for you all day with the latest news, context, and analysis. I'll see you back here at 3 p.m. with Terry Moran. Stay safe and have a fabulous Friday.
What inspired me was that my parents fought for me when I was very young. And what they did was they wanted me to know that I was an individual, and that we're all individuals, that we're all human beings, and that we're all connected together, and that we all have the same rights, the same freedom.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.